Any questions, please? Yes.
According to Hadith, it said that at the end of every century in Islam, Mujaddid would be raised to reform Islam. And we believe that the Mujaddid for the 14th century was the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, and that he was also the promised Messiah and Mahdi forthcoming. Is it now possible that from among the Khulafa of the promised Messiah, that the Mujaddid can also appear for the forthcoming centuries of Islam?
Yes, I explained that. First of all, let's first clarify the term Mujaddid and its relationship to that of Khalifa. There are two different terms used in Islam. The term Khalifa is found in the Holy Quran, and the institution of Khilafat has been described at length in Holy Quran. But you don't find the mention of Mujaddidiyya anywhere in the Holy Quran. From that, it may be safely inferred that Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was in fact discussing the shape of Khilafat in absence of the real Khilafat which was left behind by Hazrat Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself. When he mentioned Mujaddidiyya, as I see things, what he meant was that Khilafat will not continue beyond a period which would reach the turn of the century, next century. So Khilafat had to be finished before that. So some sort of substitute of Khilafat had to be there under the general term of Khilafat, of course, but not the one type of Khilafat which was left behind by Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. So that substitute is Mujaddidiyya. If the original is there is absolutely no need for any substitute. When you have water for wudu, you don't go for tayammum. So I feel that it is impossible, inconceivable for the institution of Mujaddidiyya to have started at the time when Khilafat-e-Rashida was intact. What would be the relationship between a Mujaddid and a Khalifa? And why to call the Khalifa a Mujaddid additionally? That aspect I'll discuss later. Now that is one way of looking at things. In support of this view, we find the tradition of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, who prophesies the appearance of Mujaddideen at every century. Yet when he informs us that Masih Maud would appear, then he says, "Summa takunu khilafatun ala minhaji nubuwwati." Then he doesn't repeat the institution of Mujaddidiyya at all in any way. He only prophesies that after Masih Maud has appeared, then Khilafat ala minhaji nubuwwat, Khilafat of the type which prophets leave behind, would continue, would start again. So that means that my inference that Mujaddidiyya is just a substitute for Khilafat at the time of Khilafat absence has weight, because this tradition also supports this view. But there is another way of looking at Mujaddidiyya which has a different meaning altogether, and Hazrat Masih Maud has used that meaning as well. He says the Mujaddid-e-Azam was Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The greatest of Mujaddideen was Huzur Akram himself. So he was in that sense the Mujaddid of the first century as well as the greatest of all Mujaddideen of all times. So that means a person who is appointed for a particular reform or a wide reform, an unlimited reform as well. So this meaning would be applicable to to Hazur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam alone. He was sent by Allah for an unlimited reform in every field, in every direction, for all times to come. So, because he was a consummate perception of the Mujaddidiyya, so the Masih Maud called him Mujaddid Azam. And in this respect, it may happen that at many a time, and during the institution of Khilafat, things appear which have to be attended to particularly. Some sort of errors may creep in, errors in views or malpractices and so on. So if Allah gives opportunity to a certain Khalifa to fight against those evils, in that sense of the word, he would be a Mujaddid as well. But the institution of Khilafat is higher and more permanent and is fundamental. And the institution of Mujaddidiyyat, as we see, which appears in the absence of Khilafat, that is definitely a subordinate phenomenon. Hope you understand this one. Dr. Mujib, and then afterwards you, and then your turn. Please.
We know that certain obligations become prohibitions under certain circumstances. For example, namaz, salat is prohibited for women under certain conditions. Similarly, fasting is prohibited, although it is an obligatory thing for Muslims. It is prohibited under certain conditions. Similarly, my question relates to the third obligation, which is Hajj, pilgrimage. And as I understand, sir, that if there is any danger in one's way, it is not advised or maybe prohibited, if I may use the word. It is
prohibited.
There is one, of course, incidence in the life of Holy Prophet ﷺ, and he had to turn back. Right, sir.
Where he considered it to be prohibited.
Right, sir.
While the rest of the followers, his companions, they thought it was a choice.
Sir.
You could go to Hajj despite the dangers on the way. But Guru Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam interpreted it differently. He said it is prohibited, so I will not perform Hajj.
So my question is that we know that for Ahmadis in Saudi Arabia it is prohibited and there is an impending danger for an Ahmadi who performs Hajj, that he may be imprisoned or prosecuted. So under those circumstances, when an Ahmadi performs Hajj, doesn't he contravene the Islamic injunction?
It all depends upon what he thinks about it. There are certain Ahmadis from certain countries who are granted visas by Saudi Arabian government, and they feel quite secure. And as long as they feel secure, there is no reason why they should interpret it as you interpreted it. That because there is a potent danger, so they should perform Hajj. But if somebody believes that the danger is there and still performs Hajj, that is in contravention to the spirit of that injunction which we have just spoken. Yes? Yes?
If I may be bold enough to ask two questions, I thank you.
Do these questions require boldness?
On my part, sir.
One at a time.
One at a time. My first question is just a short one. A couple of days ago, due to an intermittent fault in the loudspeaker system, people reading namaz in the hall completely lost touch with the namaz. Under such circumstances, as we don't know how long the fault is going to be, what advice do you give the congregation? What should they do under such circumstances?
If you lose touch with what the Imam is saying or doing, it is advisable to wait for a while until you feel that that particular part of namaz, that is rakat, must finished, then you can continue your own prayer. But after giving it a pause of reasonable time. For example, if you are in a sajda, there is very difficult to decide. Sometimes the Imam intentionally goes for a longer sajda, but then you know the situation and the general habit and everything, so you have to assess. But if it is in the sitting between the two sajdas, obviously you can't wait indefinitely. Within a short time you will realize that the contact has been broken, so you start saying your prayer. And when the contact is revived and you are in a position to judge which act the Imam is involved at this moment, then you start following him from there on. And your namaz will be perfect. There is no defect as far as the judgment of Allah is concerned in that namaz. Please.
My second question relates to the Holy Quran. It's not as a criticism, but really to seek advice.
Naturally, you won't criticize.
The question is, why is it that once we know that the Holy Quran was sent for the world at large, that the prophets named in the Quran by name only belong to the Middle Eastern region and not other prophets that we know came before them?
This question is done. This question I have replied at some length at various places, previously in Pakistan, Karachi, Rabwa, Lahore and so on. And the tapes are available, but still, because most of you may not have access to those tapes, I will repeat the answer to some extent. Not entirely really, but the fundamentals I will say. The fact is that when we infer or when we claim that the Holy Quran is addressing the entire people of the world, our argument is based on quite a different evidence, not on the one which you are quoting. And this does not contravene that evidence, that stands on its own. The evidence is very obvious and irrefutable. There is no religious book in the world which mentions the institution of prophet having taken place, having its manifestation anywhere else in the world or in any people other than the people to whom that book was revealed. For example, go study Bible, study the book of Zoroaster, study the book of Confucius, study Gita and so on. You will be surprised to find a total lack of mention of any reformer having come to any people in the world at any time, except for the reformers of those that time. So if those books were addressing man at large, there should have been that mention, that the entire mankind has been in contact with Allah and the reformers have been sent to them. So because the Holy Quran is the only book which refers to the institution of prophethood having been manifested in other places in the world and other people and other times. It doesn't leave anything out. Every possibility is mentioned. That positively shows that this book is addressing the whole mankind. Because if the Holy Quran even generally briefly mentions that their prophets have come and two prophets from Allah in other places, if a Muslim goes to China, he can tell them that we believe in your prophets and it's a common heritage because the Holy Quran tells us. So there is a common platform of negotiation. But those books who do not mention this phenomena, they cannot claim a common platform of negotiation. It is on this ground that we prove that the claim of the Holy Quran is correct and held good. As far as the other question is concerned, other part of the question is concerned, it's an independent question. Why all the other prophets have not been mentioned in name in such detail as the prophets of certain area and a certain faith have been described in detail. The reason is obvious, that the number of prophets known to have come to mankind is about 100,000 or more. 124,000 is said, but let's call it a few thousands, even a few hundred. Now conceive of a book mentioning the details of all these prophets, where they came and what happened to them and what happened to their enemies and everything about them. How big that book would have stolen. In the Holy Quran, apart from Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a mention of only 24 prophets by one count, and by another count maybe 23. Altogether, according to my estimation, there are 25 prophets mentioned, including Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But anyway, with one plus or minus, this is the general picture. And still, the mention of these prophets has taken a large part of the Holy Quran. So conceive now of a situation where 100,000 prophets are mentioned. And how many words are there in the Holy Quran? Words. Now verses are 6,000, words are a few thousand, and letters are 100,000 plus. So imagine the names of the prophets, if they were just mentioned, how big the book would be. So why choose one particular line then? The reason is obvious. The tree on which the last and the most consummate manifestation of prophethood was to appear, that naturally had the first preference. Because when you mention appearance of man biologically, and you count down from man backwards to the early stages of life, you don't mention every animal shape or form which may have come to existence during this process. You work backward on the same tree on which man was to evolve. So if Hazrat Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the object of creation, the only important tree worth mentioning was that lineage of prophethood on which Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam was to appear. And that is exactly what has been done in the Holy Quran. Another aspect is this, that by mentioning all these prophets, the Holy Quran has gone about in a most scientific way to preserve all the possible situations. The situations mentioned in relation to these 25 prophets are so all-comprehensive that you can't conceive of a situation happening anywhere in the world to other prophets which would lie outside the domain of the situations which the Holy Quran has covered. You can't even conceive of a situation. It's impossible. So that shows that even in lack of mention, the book remains complete. All things worth mentioning have been mentioned with reference to these prophets which have been mentioned in the Holy Quran. So I can't conceive of a better scheme. It's impossible to conceive of a better scheme than the one adopted by the Holy Quran. Yes, please.
Hazur, there is a common practice to defeat the Islamic law of inheritance by transferring the property to the favoured relatives in one's lifetime. How can this practice be remedied?
Now, the favoured relatives are two types. One type is that who, according to the Holy Quran, should have inherited a certain amount in such proportion. It is prohibited to give in one's lifetime any portion of one's property in addition to that share which he should have or she should have inherited in the normal course, because that would be depriving others and defeating the spirit of the Holy Quran. Except for the normal circumstances of a life pattern in a according as we can afford, and till they have finished their education career, those who can afford, they will continue to support. But it so happens sometimes that one boy was born in a situation, an economic situation where the things were difficult to manage. And the parents could not afford them a better education. Later on in life, perhaps, they had good means available and they could educate their boys to a much higher standard of education. So that won't be called a distinction, because there is no malintention in it. It comes as it goes, automatically it happens so. So that is not what I mean. I mean, if somebody intentionally gives a portion of his property to a favorite child or a favorite inheritor whose name is included in the list of inheritance mentioned in the Holy Quran, this is wrong and this is forbidden. But 1/3 of your property you can part with and will for anyone you like, your friends or relatives other than these. So as far as that part goes, even if you part with it in your life or give it to will it, mention it in your will to be given later on after your death, which is nothing wrong with it. It is permissible. Again, if it's not for the purpose of defeating the spirit of the Holy Quran, and somebody goes on gifting his property to some good cause or some good friend and so on, in the lifetime, because he is the owner, that is not prohibited. What is prohibited is to intentionally defeat the spirit of the system of will mentioned in the Holy Quran. Yes, please.
I'd like to ask a scientific question which relates to religion as well.
Are you from Oxford or from Gillingham? From Gillingham.
I study biology at college,
right?
And what they've taught us is that the theory of Darwin, which
that I mentioned already in one of my answers a few days ago. And also it's a very, very long discussion, and I have been giving discourse on this issue in Jamia, and we had 3 sessions, and each session lasted about 1.5 hours or so, and still I was not exhausted.
I didn't realize.
So it's a very, very long subject, in fact, to handle it properly. This is not the right forum.
Sorry.
No, but as far as this partial answer to this question is concerned, you can listen to the tape of a few days ago. You'll find there. Yes, please. Maybe?
In the Quran,
Yes.
In the Quran we read Qurana Tartila, what actually it means and what is the significance of reading Quran in that form.
Yes. Tartil is a word which is very wide in meaning and significance. It may mean in proper order. It may mean with no haste, pausing where you should pause and considering and giving it a proper order. And it may mean other things. I mean, tartil is a very interesting and interesting word with quite wide meanings to it. Normally it is understood by tartil that without haste you should continue to recite the Holy Quran in the order fixed by Allah. Now there are 2 orders in as attributed to the Holy Quran. One is order of revelation, and one is the order which was later on described to Huzur sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the verses were reorganized in that order. So to us, the second is applicable. At the time of revelation, the first part was applicable. That as things are revealed to you, you say them, repeat the recitation of the Holy Quran with tarteel, in the same order, with proper attention and in good voice. All these things, according to my comprehension of the word, are included in this. So for you it is that you consider the Holy Quran, the meanings of the Holy Quran. When you recite, that means the attention is drawn to the underlying meanings as well. Consider or ponder over the meanings of the Holy Quran in the order in which Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam was directed by Allah to reorganize the Holy Quran verses. And then you will strike gold of unlimited meanings and philosophy underneath. Yes, please.
So my question is that can we say our prayer with a tape of your praying?
Huh? No, that's not proper. One must say one's prayer behind a living Imam while he is leading. But to say the prayer listening to tapes would be a very wrong innovation. And you must desist from it, please.
Yes,
please. Yes, the ladies, please.
Yeah, so this is a question on behalf of some of my friends. They say that it's alright, the women know their responsibilities at home to look after their house, do all the work, bear children, look after them. But when their husband trusts them with all the responsibilities of the household work, but they don't trust him with financial matters. So could I just explain it to you? They say...
If it is a particular complaint, commit it to writing and send it to me. I'll speak to the gentleman concerned.
So this is not my personal complaint. Alhamdulillah.
No, but somebody else's personal complaint conveyed to you. Isn't that right?
There are
as you just mentioned, a lady who does not want to be mentioned, whose name is not to be revealed here, has asked you this question. Naturally, she couldn't have thought of it unless she must have had a bitter experience about it. So kindly tell her to write to me. And I'll try to convince the man not to be so cruel and stingy.
No, so they say that they are not provided with any pocket money or the house keeping money.
Yes.
As is the usual practice. I know with the family of the promised Messiah as well. Yes. And with so many good amenities, including my husband. But
yes, you know your husband is here and listening to you. That is obvious.
No, so I know you as a father is here, so I am not afraid of anyone.
Please. The fact is that as you have yourself explained, you didn't ask a question for an answer. You already knew the answer. So that thing has been aired and fetched, and everybody knows that anybody who indulges in such behavior is wrong. And this should not be encouraged at all in Ahmadi man. As you have mentioned rightly, in our family, most often than not, the property of the husband and the property of the wife are just like one. There is no difference whatsoever. And nobody keeps count of who is taking money from whom and how much to give and how much not to give. Practically, when the wife needs something, it is the whole property of the husband belongs to her. And if she also has a property at the time of leave, she offers it to the husband. And this is, in fact, the sunnah of Huzur Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's first wife, Hazrat Khadija. When she got married to Huzur sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, she offered her entire property to Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So he also behaved like that to her and to the following wives. Because it is never mentioned in any tradition that he kept anything for himself alone, as apart from the money he distributed to the wives. Although it was a very meager living, and Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam lived very meagerly along with his wives, but the point which I am making is this, that he never kept money to himself and gave little to the wives. That situation never arose. Whatever he had, that is obvious that he gave it to the poor and others, but did never keep things from his wives. So that sunnah is from both sides, from the wife's side as well as from the side of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And this is the ideal home. No better home can be conceived in any country, in any situation, than this home, which the style of which we learn from Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Just a minute, please. Yes. After yes, please.
Huzur, women these days have coined a new phrase in this context. They say what's yours is mine, what is mine is mine.
Mine.
So the question I was going to ask, if I may, relates to the Islamic law of evidence. The Holy Quran equates the evidence of two women to one man.
That already I have explained. Yes, I have explained in my speech on the final day of the last Salana. And also I spoke on this subject at some length in Islamabad recently. When I visited Islamabad about just more than 2 weeks ago. There this question was asked, and we have a full cassette recording, a visual recording as well of that. So why not write to them and they should send you the video recordings of all the sessions in Islamabad. Have you? Yes, please. Just yes. Shall it be after the lady? Okay. Yes, please.
हजूर ये सवाल भी एक बहन की तरफ से है। वो कहती हैं कि जो कुरान करीम की ये आयत है, वमा असाबकुम मिन मुसीबतिन फबिमा कसबत अयदीकुम व याफू अन कसीर, तो इसमें हम दुनिया में देखते हैं कि बात एक फैमिली या कुछ पे बहुत ज़्यादा आजमाइशें या इम्तिहान आते हैं, तो जबकि बाज़ लोग जो इतने नेक भी नहीं होते वो बहुत ऐश करते हैं, तो क्या ये हमारे गुनाह या अमाल की वजह से होता है?
No, that was a particular situation in the Holy Quran which is discussed in that verse which we have quoted. It is not a generalized situation, because the Holy Quran in other places contradicts this concept that everything which befalls a man is because of his ill deed. Because in one verse, the Holy Quran warns people against calamity, nationwide calamity, which will not make distinction between good and bad. And even the good people will suffer in such calamity that may befall man of a very wide national volume and application. So that contradicts this conception. Because if everything befalls one because of his own ill deed, then how can you interpret this verse? That verse which we have just mentioned applies to a certain situation alone. Yes, please. Now, Brother Ismail from Ghana. Yes. Were you the ambassador in Germany?
Ambassador in Ethiopia.
In Ethiopia, exactly. And where else?
Only that place.
Only Ethiopia. When you met me last time, quite right.
This question of mine, it's a long-standing question, my personal question. I even had occasion to myself speak about the beauties and the excellences of the Holy Quran. But I'm still puzzled by this question, that we've read the Holy Quran many times over. And those that have read it over several times myself. And we know the beauty and the excellences of the Holy Quran. But then each time you come to, or I come to a new chapter, which I've read several times over, thought about it several times. Each time I come to it, it still becomes new to me. Correct. And I never get fed up with reading it even 100 times. Well, there's no other book
which can claim such a thing.
That, so there's something.
That's just beautiful and the right thing to say. This should be the observation of everyone who recites the Holy Quran with application of mind. For those who just recite without knowing what they are doing, for them as well, there will not be any boredom because they just are carried by sing song of their recitations. And because there is no meaning repeated, so that they are not bored. And those who do it with application of mind, they always discover new meanings. And that is the beauty of the Holy Quran, that this is an unending universe which unfolds itself in so many ways, from so many angles, that always there is a new vista of beauty opened up to the observer in it, on the planet. Correct? Yes, some gentleman has parked his car in front of someone's alleyway or some his gate. HWK 845V must immediately go and remove the car from there because he is hindering the owner of the house from going out. HWK 845V must immediately remove his car from where he is parked because it is hindering the passage to somebody's house. Blocking the passage. Yes, please. Yes.
Assalamualaikum.
Yes.
So could you explain why Hadith Qudsi, which is also a revelation from God, is not included in the Holy Quran?
Why? What?
Hadith Qudsi.
Hadith Qudsi, right. In fact, not only the Hadith Qudsi, but all the sayings of the Holy Prophet have roots in the Holy Quran. You can't think of a single tradition of the Holy Prophet which was truly said by him, which does not have a root in the Holy Quran. It's for you to ponder over this and to discover where some particular tradition has its roots in the Holy Quran. And it's a very beautiful exercise. Once you discover it, then you know the enjoyment of discovery. And I have not found so far any tradition on which I investigated and failed to find its root in the Holy Quran. Yes, please. Hashim Saab. How is your nephew, was it?
No, my younger brother.
Your younger brother?
Yes.
How is he?
He is still under the critical condition.
Is he?
Yes. So they said it's about 12 more hours.
Huh?
The 12 more hours, the doctor said.
You will remain
Yes, it will
in that
remain.
condition.
So I request please to pray. So my question is that in Madinah al-Munawwara, in Masjid al-Nabawi, on the right hand side of the blessed tomb of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a place left about which in some of the books it is mentioned that this is the place where Hazrat Isa will come.
How did you know that?
Because this is mentioned over there in a small plate.
What?
That this is the place where Hazrat Isa will come. When Hazrat Isa will come, he will be buried in these places. And this is small plate.
This is quite contradictory to what I have heard about it from reliable sources.
So it's not.
And particularly traditions.
Yes.
Traditions tell us that there is no place between him and the next, who is buried next in order? Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq. And the tradition tells us that there is nobody in between the two.
No, it's not in between the two. I'm saying those three graves are, in the center is the Hazrat Rasul on the right hand side is Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq.
Yes.
And on the right of that is this middle space.
On the right of?
Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq.
I see.
Yes.
Quite right.
And this is mentioned in some book that this is the place where Hazrat Isa when he will come again, that he will be buried. Is it this interpretation is being taken? I understand that this must have been coming from the time, not of exactly the Holy Prophet ﷺ, but soon.
No, I'll explain that. That was the question now.
Is it from that hadith where it says
this is where they have, please sit down. The question is that in the tomb of Rasul ﷺ, where he is buried, next to him on the right is Hazrat Abu Bakr, and next to him there is an empty space where another person can be buried. Enough room for a new grave to be done and somebody to be buried. And there is a small plate over the wall which mentions that this is the place reserved for Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. When he returns to earth and dies, then he will be buried. Now, the foundation for this is a tradition of Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which has been wrongly interpreted by these people who have mentioned or who have hung that plate over there. Because the tradition says categorically that Hazrat Isa alayhi salam will be buried in Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam's own grave, not by his side. So because that seems to be so absurd to them, they have to change the meaning to this. Only through our interpretation that problem can be solved, not by theirs. The Holy Quran, the hadith which you have mentioned is this, that yudfanu ma'i fi qabri. When Hazrat Isa alayhi salam comes, he would be buried ma'i, maybe next to me or with me. Both meanings are true or right. But it says fi qabri. With me, I mean in my own grave. So this is the obvious meaning, that he would be buried in the grave of Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam with him. Because it's impossible for any man to conceive for that grave to be dug open for the sake of any son of anybody. So they have deviated from this and attributed the wrong meaning to this tradition. But in our view, this does not mean this at all. In fact, there are two things mentioned about imams who have been prophesied to come by Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam. About Imam Mahdi, he says, the name of his father would be the name of my father, that is Abdullah. The name of his mother would be the name of my mother, that is Amna. And his name would be my name. So that is to say, the beginning would be my beginning. He would be as pious in birth as I am pious in my birth. If you differentiate between the two, then you have no right to do that. Because if you, for example, attack him as to the manner of his birth or this or that, like Hazrat Isa alayhi salam in the old was attacked. So you will be doing injustice to him, and in fact you will be attacking me. That is a way of saying. And so in our own language too, in other languages too, it is said that his death is my death. I will not be buried in his grave. He will not be buried in my grave. This is a way of expression to denote a common or a different end. So by somebody being buried in the grave of Huzur Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it only means that don't attack his end. If you go about describing his end, the way he dies, in a manner which is like censuring or going into invectives about it or coming out with fake stories about that, then remember that because his end is my end, you will be attacking me in doing so. That was in fact a prophecy. Because Hazrat Masih Maud has been exactly attacked in this manner. They say he died in lavatory. So stupid for people to say that and people to believe that, because nobody of the enemy could ever be witness of this fact. Even if somebody had died in the lavatory, nobody could ever conceive of a situation where somebody is watching an enemy whose nearness you cannot reach, you cannot go there, to be witness of his death in a place. So, obviously it is absolutely false on its own premises, totally rejectable. But this has been done. You know, as every other entity also knows, how the Maulvis go about it and alleging that Masih Maud died in the world. So because that attack was to be made on his end, Ahmad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam forestalled it by telling that his death, his end would be my end. So, as if he is buried in my grave. So if you attack him, you attack me. Be cautious about it. Think twice before you do that. That is a prophecy in fact. Yes, please. And then the last question.
As far as my little knowledge of history and old one also goes, particularly of Islamic history, I don't remember of any war that was fought during the period of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that can be called an offensive war. Now my question is, what religious justification we give to wars that were fought in Iran, particularly during the period of Tahir Archive? The countries conquered and they were ruled. What religious justification?
The fact is that if you, first of all, believe that there is no war permissible except a religious war, then this question is valid. But if this is not your belief, and wars other than religious are also permissible in certain situations, then this question as such is not valid. Until you prove that not only on the religious grounds, but on political grounds as well, that and that war fought by or waged by a certain caliph was wrong. So in that case, it is not just a generalization. It should require an answer. You have to be particular about a certain war and tell me that that war had neither a justification from religious point of view, that is to say it was not a holy war, nor it had a justification from other exigencies of the situation. Because the wars which are fought today, it is just possible that both the participants are wrong, partly he and partly the other one. It is also possible that one is wrong and other is the one who is wrongful. And it is also possible that there is no fault of anybody. Both are doing it in good faith, with good intention, only they are mistaken. All these possibilities are there. Yet neither of the three possibilities belongs to a religious field. Religious wars or holy wars are a different phenomenon altogether. But once the empires came into being, when the state came into existence, a state in the name of Islam, but it was not Islam, it was a Muslim state. So whatever happened after that, it might have pertained to the region of statecraft. And that war will be judged by the customs and traditions of that age, not by the concept of statecraft as you hold today, nor by the practices of today, but practices of those days. If those practices and traditions and the international relationships warrants a war for reasons other than religious, then there can't be any censure. But even if in that context that war is not warranted, then you can censure that caliph, all right. You have the right and everybody has the right. Why should we go on defending anybody while the Holy Quran does not in any way try to defend the cause of that person? So that is what I want to tell you. It always goes, instead of generalities, go to the particular situations. Ask the person who thinks a war was a wrong war, it had no justification. Tell him that, okay, first of all, tell me justification from what point of view? How can you call it a holy war? It was not a holy war. According to the Holy Quran, the verse mentioned in Surah Hajj, the conditions of holy war do not apply. But is there no war apart from holy wars? Most of the wars are not holy wars. They are wars of compulsion, of human situation. So why can't caliphs fight wars under that head for those compulsions, which are just secular compulsions? Because they were not just holding a religious office, they were holding the office of a state, the custodians of a state. Now that is all for the time being. Let's say the prayer now.